There was a comment made recently to do with Avalokiteshvara and the origins of some of the more popular iconographic forms that are found in Himalayan art. Now, the Karandavyuha is really the earliest sutra we have that goes into any detail about Avalokiteshvara. But I don't really know how much of an influence that sutra has had on the actual iconography, because the iconography is very sketchy in the two-section or two-chapter sutra. But what we can say about the Karandavyuha, now this is an early sutra. We're looking at possibly earliest stories coming out of the 2nd, 3rd, and then developed in the 4th century of the Common Era. Now, what we do have in a chronological order is in the first few portions of the sutra, we do have mention of Avalokiteshvara with 100,000 arms and 100,000 times 10 million eyes, and then 11 heads. So this, of course, is a reference to the 11-faced, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. But we have this also from other texts, ritual texts of the period. So whether or not the Karandavyuha is borrowing from the other Dharani texts, or the Dharani texts are a development from the Karandavyuha, well, that will take some more research on other scholars' part. We do have reference again in a little bit later in the sutra to the 11-faced, 1,000-armed. But very shortly after that, I believe at section 122, then we do have the beginning of the mention of how all of the Hindu gods emanate from the form of Avalokiteshvara. And so that form is what is commonly called a Shristhikantha. And we see that in art as a standing figure, often red, most often red, and from his eyes, his forehead, his teeth, his belly button, from different parts of his body, you have all of these Hindu gods are emanating, showing that Avalokiteshvara is the true Ishvara, the true Lord of the universe. Now, much later in the second section, then we get a discussion of Avalokiteshvara with a son and a daughter, and the son is called the Manidharan, and the daughter is Shadakshari. And often in early art, the son is one-faced, two-armed, and the daughter is a one-faced, four-armed. And son sits on Avalokiteshvara's right and the daughter on the left. Now, what's very unusual, a little bit odd, is that in describing an early mandala for this, then Amitabha is placed in the middle with Manidharan and Shadakshari on either side, and there's no actual description of a one-faced, four-armed Chaturbhuja Avalokiteshvara, which is what we find later in art as being representative of the Karandavyuha Sutra, and then the very famous mantra that is also taught soon after the description of the mandala. And of course the mantra is a 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. And but before the mantra is actually given, at another short story is told about a visit to Varanasi and receiving the mantra and I presume the mandala from a experienced Dharma practitioner. Then there was some doubt as to whether or not the Dharma practitioner should actually give the mantra and the initiation. And then an Avalokiteshvara with one face, two arms, holding a lotus, appears in the sky above. Now, this very, very well may be the origins of the Khasarpana Avalokiteshvara, because the terms Khasarpana means being in the sky or flying in the sky. And where we find longer versions of this Khasarpana story are in the History of Buddhism by Bhutan Tamche Khenpa, and then later on the edited version of that by Taranatha. we find more information. But you know what? It is not really compelling as a story of what are the origins for Khasarpana, Avalokiteshvara. The Bhutun and the Taranata leave one a little bit cold. It's a little bit dry. It's a little bit thin as to its history and function. Whereas at least there is some meaning here. So this could be the actual origin for the Khasarpana. Now, we've already discussed 4 different forms of Avalokiteshvara, and then at the very end there is a mantra given for the goddess Chunda. Chunda has different forms, but in China primarily one face, 18 arms, and she's often regarded as an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. Now, I believe that this is most likely explained because this mantra, short mantra for Chunda, is taught and is made mention of at the end of the Karandavyuha Sutra, whereas there are other texts, the Chunda Dharani text, there are other texts for Chunda that may have a different and more elaborate origin story, or a way of understanding the origin of Chunda that might be separate from being an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. But that would probably need a little bit of more expertise from that Chinese literature side. So we'll leave it there. You can press the like button, you can subscribe, you can join HAR on Patreon, help support the work we do, and you can also make a donation on the homepage of Himalayan Art Resources.